Welcome to Gay Fairfax, the Washington metro area's only weekly gay cable magazine featuring news, views, and pride. I'm Beth Goodman.
And I'm Barry Forbes. Each week we'll present events and personalities of interest to the gay women and men in Northern Virginia. On this edition, a local attorney advises gay couples on estate planning.
And we'll look in on some Scottish fairies as we visit with the Celtic Society.
But first, here's Peg McCraw with this week's gay trivia question.
The Well of Loneliness, Radcliffe Hall's novel about lesbian love, was banned on 2 continents in the 1920s. That was 70 years ago. Book banning doesn't happen anymore, does it? After all, we are an enlightened society that accepts homosexuality as an alternative lifestyle, right? Sure we are. Can you name 3 books that were banned or nearly banned in the 1980s due to their homosexual content? Stay tuned. I'll be back with the answer.
The Celtic Society is a local group of gay men and women who get together to celebrate their Celtic heritage. Every month they focus on a specific topic relating to their Irish and Scottish heritage. One recent meeting focused on Scottish fairies. And of course, Gay Fairfax just had to be there.
Fáilte. That means welcome for those of you who have never heard such a term before. It's Gaelic. My name is Tom McRoberts, and this is the May 1991 meeting of the Gay Celtic Society of Washington, D.C. We are a group that meets the first Friday of every month. Most of our meetings have lately been in Northern Virginia. We have a potluck and a planned topic, a little bit of business, not too much. We look into a bit of history, a bit of folklore, just about anything you can pick up having to do with the 6 Celtic nations. We are not highly organized. We don't actually have officers. We keep it very loose, and we believe in it as a members club, and the members are free to make of the club what they wish, to participate, to lead, to follow, to sit back and listen, or plug into some good bagpipe music and whiskey. We have a meeting once a month, the first Friday of every month. We try to get back to everyone beforehand, about a week or so before, to remind them of the meeting. And we also keep each other abreast of happenings as far as entertainment and events in the Washington, D.C. area Celtic community, the Scots festivals, the Irish entertainers, and such. Most of us do belong to other groups of similar interest out in the straight world. We have members in our group of the St. Andrew's Society, individual clans, Kadasha Cornuiskibe, the Whiskey Tasting Society. There are certain things you study or want to know more about or wish to be encouraged about that somehow or other you might not feel comfortable doing out in the straight world. Actually, people that call me wonder just how very gay we are. And actually, I don't think we do all that much that might not be of interest to a non-gay person in these events. However, I've never come away from a meeting dissatisfied with what I've heard. There's a great deal of storytelling. We try to get away from boring history.
So there are no historians watching this, so take exception to that.
Well, that's we have to go by the idea. I'm a bit of an historian, but I know I have to make my talks interesting to those who aren't particularly historians. I did a talk about a year ago that I called it A Bunch of Scottish Queens. And I ran through the Stuart succession from the time of Robert the Bruce through James VI, who really was a Scottish queen, as well as a king. And we're able to point out with delight which of the Scottish heroes were thought to be gay and why, and what it must have been like. These are things that the approach in a straight group might be a bit looked down upon, I don't know. It seems to be a matter of, within certain groups, survival, the way just day-to-day living can be out amongst the straight world. I don't think they'd rise up and attack you with their skein dupes if they knew you were gay. I don't think anyone's fooling anyone in our group. It's just, yeah, you have to be comfortable with your own. Our topic for this evening is Scottish fairies. Now, this is not a look at our membership of the Gay and Lesbian Celtic Society, but a look at the wee folk of Scotland and how they might stack up against the wee folk of Ireland, who are grinning, mindless little dancing green people. The Scottish fairies aren't like that. Scottish fairies, unlike our friendly leprechauns, are considered to be descended from the Picts. They are not hospitable, they are not jolly as leprechauns are, and it's not necessarily good luck to find one, and they're probably not going to give you a pot of gold. How do I put it in a nice way? Scottish fairies are, well, they're kind of evil. They tend to attack people. They steal from you. They'll mate with you, which may or may not be good, because once they're done with you, they sort of figure the whole world's done with you. In Scottish folklore, there's a certain amount of sucking up that's done to the Scottish fairies. You do a certain number of things so as not to anger them. Not unlike an evening at tracks, I'm sure. First of all, I'll start with a little bit of birth rituals that are common, maybe more in the hinterlands rather than the cities. Fairies in Scotland are known for stealing babies. They'll replace your baby with one of their own, and that's where we get changelings. A mother might say of the child after a certain period of misbehavior or something that, oh, he or she is nae ane mine. It's different from when the father says it. It has a totally different meaning. There are precautions to keep your baby from being changed. One is if the father walks 7 times around the house clockwise from east to west. They call it sunwise. I sort of figured it out. And, oh, they mean clockwise, but they didn't say it in my source. Keeping a knife in the cradle will keep the fairies away. No fire or light should be carried out of the room where a baby is until the baby's at least a week old. Like if you're in there with a flashlight or a candle, don't carry it out lit or leaves it wide open. And even with all these birth rituals, you have to be very careful because no matter what else you do, I mean, these are just precautions you can take. They do not guarantee anything because fairies in Scotland can do anything, which makes us kind of wonderful. Unfortunately, we don't have those traditions on this side of the Atlantic because the one thing that the fairies cannot do is travel across water. So we don't have to worry about these things over here. Again, this is only in Scotland. Fairies have been known to not only steal the children, but they will interbreed with adult people over there. And if you've been to Scotland and seen some of the people, you realize what a very tempting thing that would be for anyone to do. They very often don't have children of their own when they breed with mortal people. It can happen, but it doesn't happen very often. There's one clan called the Macodrums, who are known to be descended directly from the fairies. I personally don't know any of the Macodrums. I'm not sure what sense, if any, they have. They don't seem to be in any of the books, but if you meet a Macodrum, they are descended from the fairies. In the islands, one thing that the fairies will often do, and I'm using fairies right now in a very broad general sense of all the wee folk or the supernatural folk. So let me start in the sea creatures. A great many of them are from the seas, because we have the islands. They will swim from one island to the next in their randy little pursuit of pleasure. In the Shetlands, it happens a great deal. A great many of these traditions come from the Shetland Islands. They'll often disguise themselves as seals. In fact, there are people who are known as the seal people. They will cast off their seal skins, and they're usually astoundingly great looking. And they'll get on shore and they'll meet up with someone they want to meet up with and marry them, and for as long as it suits them to do. You generally can't shoo a seal person away unless you find their seal skin. When you place it in front of them, they are powerless. They have to go back into it. Around the Scottish Islands is the tradition of the mermaids. Again, the mermaids tend to be fairly evil. They'll get you, they'll use you for their own purposes, and then you will be disposed of. A fisherman catching a mermaid in his net, if he has half a brain in his head at all, will throw her back immediately. Moving from the sea to the land creatures, we run into the very dangerous creature called the Kelpie. The Kelpie can take on many forms. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of the Loch Ness Monster. Well, anyone in Scotland will tell you that the Loch Ness Monster is probably the most wayward Kelpie ever. There was a time when Kelpies would, just about any major body of water in Scotland had its own Kelpie. And the Loch Ness Monster is not considered by any means an unusual thing, except for what it's done in the past century. A lot of the natives and those who know Kelpie lore wonder why it just doesn't jump up out of the sea one day and give interviews like it was some kind of a film star. I'll leave you with an introduction to one more creature, and this is the brownie. The brownie is found more often in the Borders area and Galloway. They're thought to be more Gallic rather than Pictish like the other Scottish fairy folk. In fact, on the Borders they'll probably change sides with the English now and again. But every farmhouse in this area is thought to, at least originally, have its very own brownie. These little people are gone during the day. Nothing you do can get them out during the day. But at night he comes out and lives to do some little bit of work. It is not uncommon for the people in these regions to leave some little thing out, like the dinner dishes or some socks to darn. And when they wake up in the morning, the task is completed and all their materials neatly put away, which makes it very useful. All he asks is a little meal, some bread and cheese, now and again a wee dram, but nothing more than that, nothing extravagant. He's very proud. He just feels it's his function. If on this farm you do a little bit of hanky-panky with someone the brownie feels you shouldn't, that is, if you're not actually married to them, your brownie will not have anything more to do with you again. For that little bit of hanky-panky, you can do your own dishes the rest of your life, folks. As you can tell, if you've been to Scotland or are going, you'll find it is a very magical place, and you'll find, once you are there, at the next performance of Peter Pan, when Peter turns to the audience and says, "Do you believe in fairies?" not only will you applaud, you'll stand up and yell, "Yes! Yes!" if you have not done so already. Thank you very much.
For gay couples, estate planning is the closest legal thing we have to marriage. So in that sense, estate planning is both legal protection and a statement of commitment.
Dave Hughes and David Job recently talked with Linda Royster, a local attorney who specializes in estate planning for lesbians and gay men.
Well, Linda, thank you for taking your time to come to our home to talk to us. My lover David and I have been together for about 4 years, and we feel it's time, in fact maybe it's even a little past time, that we think about things such as wills and what would happen if one of us were to die. I mean, I know we don't get the same protections that a married couple would get by their marriage license, so what sorts of things do we need?
Well, actually, you can protect yourself better than married couples because you can make your choices about what it is you want to do. Of course, the first thing you need to think about is a will. And what a will does is simply provide what will happen to your property when one of you dies. You can leave your property to anyone you want. And what we need to be thinking about as we go through the details of what you want in your will is to be sure you have all your property in your mind and think about your family, your friends, as well as your lover, and how you want to dispose of that property. And that includes everything you own. tangible property, which is things that you can touch, intangible property like stocks and bonds and bank accounts, things of that nature, and real estate. Do you own your own home?
Yes.
Okay, that's an important thing to consider, what will happen to that home, and to be sure that your lover is protected if that's your joint wish in the event that either of you dies. In addition to concerning yourself with what you need when you die, though, you need to also worry about what it is that's going to happen if one of you should become incapacitated or unable to make your own decisions. And there are a few things to look at. The first one, and probably the most important, is what's called a power of attorney. And what a power of attorney does is designate someone to act for you and do the things that you would do for yourself if you were able to do them. That can include anything, and you all need to decide what it is you might want done for you if you were incapacitated for a short term or a long term. What many people do, particularly close couples, is decide that their lover will be able to act for them in making basic business decisions and often in making health care decisions. Those are the two important things to think about. In terms of business decisions, who's going to pay the mortgage? Who's going to collect your salary, your disability payments? What's all going to happen about that? If you have perhaps a business of your own or a substantial estate that needs to be managed, somebody has to be doing those things for you if you can't do them for yourself. In terms of healthcare decisions, that gets to be really complicated. The most important things that most people want is someone to make the decision to continue or terminate life support systems in the event that they have a terminal illness or are in a coma forever, or what's called a persistent vegetative state, which means you have no cognitive understanding or knowledge of what's going on.
And probably no reasonable chance to recover from that.
Well, precisely what you need to decide is, do you want to make some advance directive for what will happen if you're in those conditions, and exactly which conditions do they apply to? Some people, for example, want to pull the plug, as it's called, if they have a terminal illness or a terminal condition. Others also want the plug pulled if they're in a persistent vegetative state where there's no hope that they will ever recover, but they could live 30 years as long as someone feeds them. Mm-hmm. Another important thing you need to think about in terms of a medical decision, if you're going to terminate life support systems, do you consider nutrition and hydration to be a medical treatment or something that you want continued at all costs?
I've heard a lot these days about living trusts, and they are hyped a lot in a lot of personal finance magazines as a way to cut through probate. And the disadvantage to them would be that they're more expensive, but the advantage would be there are not the costs of probate, the length of time in probate, and also it pretty much makes, well, it makes your will or your affairs a lot less contestable. What do you think about living trusts? Do you think they're a viable option for a gay couple such as ourselves?
Well, there can be some circumstances when a trust is a useful document. On the whole, though, most people can manage their affairs much more simply, and the costs of probate are not particularly excessive. For example, if you choose to have your home, which is most people's biggest asset, go to your lover at your death, you simply ought to title that property as joint tenants with right of survivorship. Now, these days, many people do that, but there are still a lot of people who, particularly if they went to a straight lawyer for their settlement, when they bought their home, do not have their property titled in that way. So you ought to check your deed first. If it says that you own the property as tenants in common, you need to understand that that property will not pass to your lover when you die.
Okay. Fortunately, I know that we set ours up to be joint tenants with right of survivorship.
Okay, then you understand that that property will not pass through probate. Instantly upon the death of either of you, the other owns that property. Now, of course, it is still part of your estate for estate tax purposes, should there be any federal estate tax, and for the small Virginia estate tax. But it is not part of your probate estate that needs to be managed or handled by anyone. Secondly, other assets that you own jointly, such as savings, stocks, bonds, all of those things can also be titled as joint tenants with right of survivorship, and also will pass outside of your probate estate, so that no probate of any of those assets is necessary. Your automobile can be titled as joint tenants with right of survivorship. So it depends on the circumstance. In a circumstance where you would be interested in setting up a trust such that the property would pass automatically to your lover, that can happen more simply just by the way you titled the property, and still leave you with much more flexibility in dealing with those assets, rather than setting it up in a trust. And then once it's in the trust document governs what you can do with the assets that are in the trust. And it can't be but so flexible because you can't always plan ahead. So for most people who don't have massive estates, I don't recommend that. Now there are some circumstances, and you all may need to tell me more about your particular life circumstances and perhaps your work. There are some people, for example, who might be threatened by malpractice claims, physicians, lawyers, accountants, people of that nature, who may want to absolutely remove title from them altogether. And if that's your circumstance, then we need to think some more about a living trust. But if your circumstance is the customary one of owning a home, owning a couple of cars, perhaps beginning some savings and stocks and bonds, then I don't recommend ordinarily a living trust. The other thing that you did mention, though, is contestability. And it is possible that if you have particularly disagreeable family members, we may want to play around some with the way that your assets are held in order to be sure that we maximize the chances of exactly what you want happening. Let's talk first about powers of attorney.
Okay.
Okay?
In fact,
Because that's the most important document, I think, for you to prepare, because it's what you need absolutely. The risk of being injured, incapacitated, of really needing someone to manage your affairs for you is unfortunately very real in our world today. So the two aspects, the business powers of attorney and the medical powers of attorney. Have you decided you'd like to name each other, or do you have other people that you'd like to name to make those decisions for you?
We've not specifically discussed that, but I would assume we would want to name the other person.
Yeah, I would
You
think
agree?
so.
Okay.
But then we should also have an alternate person in mind in case the other
Right.
person were also unable to perform those duties.
You'd mentioned living wills earlier. How is that different from just a regular will?
A living will designates what will happen to you while you are still alive. And the term living will really bears no relation to what it is. It describes what your wishes are in the event that you are being kept alive by life support systems. You know, the tubes and the respirator and the machines. The law is a little unclear about exactly what it is you're entitled to do. In Virginia, there is a living will statute which permits you to state that you wish life support systems terminated in the event you have a terminal condition. But what if you don't have a terminal condition? What if you are in a persistent vegetative state or an irreversible coma? That's what most people are really worried about. Many would like life support systems terminated if they're about to die, but it's if they're not about to die and may live for years that
Right.
people really have a concern. So it's important for you to execute a living will to state your wishes if you are in a terminal condition and your wishes if you are in a persistent vegetative state or an irreversible coma. And if you instruct me to do that, I'll prepare a document either way that includes your wishes.
Now that I think we have a fairly good understanding of what the documents involved are and so forth, how do we proceed?
We proceed by getting down to the details right now. We'll go through exactly how you want your property designated, exactly who the individuals are that you want to designate for your power of attorney.
Okay, well,
Thank
let's
you.
get going.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, how'd you do with this week's gay trivia question? Here's Peg McCraw with the answer.
How many of these books have you read? The Front Runner by Patricia Nell Warren, One for the Gods by Gordon Merrick, Understanding Gay Relatives and Friends by Clinton R. Jones.
Well, that wraps up this edition of Gay Fairfax. Now, don't forget that you can tune into Gay Fairfax every single week at this time. For Gay Fairfax, I'm Barry Forbes.
And I'm Beth Goodman. Thank you for joining us. And remember to keep the pride alive.